It traveled 6,000 miles across the Pacific Ocean with no engine, no pilot, and no guidance system, and it killed 6 Americans on a quiet mountain trail in Oregon. By late 1944, Japan's military leadership was facing a problem that had no conventional solution. The war had turned decisively against them. American bombers were beginning to reach the Japanese home islands. The naval and air forces that had once projected Japanese power across the Pacific had been worn down through years of attrition that Japanese industrial capacity could not replace at anything close to the rate American production was replacing Allied losses. And yet the idea of striking back at the American mainland directly, of bringing the war to American soil the way it had been brought to Japanese cities, remained a goal that Japanese military planners had not abandoned. The problem was distance. 6,000 miles of open Pacific Ocean separated Japan from the western coast of the United States. No Japanese aircraft of the period had the range to make that journey and return. Conventional naval attack on the American mainland had been tried once in early 1942 when a Japanese submarine had shelled an oil facility near Santa Barbara, California, a strike that caused minimal physical damage but proved that the American coastline was not entirely beyond reach. What Japanese military scientists turned to next was something that sounds, on first description, almost too simple to be taken seriously: the wind. High above the Pacific Ocean, at altitudes between roughly 30,000 and 38,000 feet, there exists a powerful eastward-flowing air current that modern meteorology calls the jet stream. In the 1940s, the jet stream was not widely understood by Western scientists, but Japanese meteorologists had been studying high-altitude wind patterns for years, partly through weather balloon research, and they had identified something significant. During the winter months, this high-altitude current flowed consistently eastward across the Pacific Ocean at speeds that could carry an object from Japan to North America in a matter of days. If you could build something that floated at the right altitude, stayed aloft long enough, and carried something dangerous when it came down, the wind itself would do the work that aircraft could not. The weapon that emerged from this thinking was designated Fugo, a balloon bomb. The balloons themselves were remarkable feats of engineering for their time, constructed largely from a material that created an entire secondary industrial effort inside wartime Japan. The envelope of each balloon was made from layers of washi, traditional Japanese paper made from mulberry bark, laminated together with a paste derived from a type of potato. The paper was cut into segments, glued together by hand in a process that required enormous numbers of workers, and assembled into balloons roughly 33 feet in diameter when inflated. A significant portion of the workforce assigned to this production were young Japanese schoolgirls, recruited to work in factories and large halls, including, according to some accounts, sumo arenas and theaters repurposed for the effort, gluing together the paper segments under wartime conditions that left little room for anything but the work itself. Each balloon was filled with hydrogen and carried a payload that typically included incendiary devices and, in some configurations, anti-personnel fragmentation bombs. The genuinely clever part of the design was the altitude control system. A balloon rising and falling with temperature changes over a multi-day Pacific crossing would eventually either rise too high and burst, or descend too low and fall into the ocean long before reaching North America. Japanese engineers solved this with an automated ballast system, a ring of sandbags attached beneath the balloon, connected to an altimeter-triggered mechanism that released individual sandbags whenever the balloon dropped below a certain altitude, lightening the load and allowing it to rise back into the jet stream. The system was calibrated to keep the balloon cycling within the jet stream's altitude band for roughly 3 days, the estimated time required to cross the Pacific. When the sandbags were exhausted, the final mechanism would release the bomb payload and then ignite a flash charge to destroy the balloon itself, eliminating evidence of its origin. Beginning in November 1944, Japan launched these balloons from sites along its eastern coast, primarily from 3 locations on the island of Honshu, where launch crews would release the balloons during favorable wind conditions, typically timed to take advantage of the strongest seasonal jet stream activity through the winter months. Estimates of the total number launched vary, but historical accounts generally place the figure at approximately 9,000 balloons released between November 1944 and April 1945. Most of them never made it. Many descended into the ocean. Others were lost to mechanical failure, weather, or simply drifted off course into areas where they were never found or reported. Of the thousands launched, only a few hundred are confirmed to have reached North America, found scattered across a remarkable range of locations from Alaska down through California, and inland as far as Michigan, and even reports as far east as the Great Lakes region. The American response to the balloons that were discovered was, for most of the campaign, characterized by a deliberate and carefully maintained silence. When the first balloon fragments and unexploded devices began turning up in late 1944 and early 1945, American military and intelligence officials faced a decision that required weighing 2 competing concerns against each other. On one hand, the balloons represented a genuine, if limited, threat. Some carried incendiary devices specifically designed to start forest fires across the heavily wooded Pacific Northwest, a region where wartime America's lumber industry was a significant contributor to the war effort, and where forest fires represented both an economic and a psychological vulnerability. On the other hand, American officials understood something that Japanese planners almost certainly did not know with certainty: how effective the campaign actually was. If American newspapers reported balloon landings, fires, and casualties, that information could potentially reach Japan through neutral countries, through intercepted communications, or through any number of channels. And it would tell Japanese military planners that their weapon was working, encouraging continuation and possibly expansion of the program. If American newspapers reported nothing, Japanese planners had no way to know whether their balloons were reaching their targets at all. The United States government made a decision and enforced it through the Office of Censorship. News of the balloon bombs would not be reported. For months, balloons fell across the American West, in forests, on farmland, occasionally near towns, and the American public remained almost entirely unaware that any of it was happening. This decision, made for sound strategic reasons by people who could not have anticipated every consequence, created the conditions for what happened on May 5, 1945, near the small town of Bly in southern Oregon. Reverend Archie Mitchell, a pastor at a local church, had organized what was meant to be a pleasant outing for his wife and a group of children from his congregation, a picnic in the forested hills near Gearhart Mountain, an area of pine forest and mountain streams that was popular with local families. Elsie Mitchell, Archie's wife, was pregnant. The group included 5 children from the congregation: Joan Patsky, Jay Gifford, Edward Engen, Sherman Shoemaker, and Dick Patsky. Archie Mitchell parked the car and began unloading picnic supplies. Elsie and the children walked ahead toward a clearing. What happened next has been reconstructed from Archie Mitchell's own account, given in the immediate aftermath, and from the physical evidence at the scene. Elsie and the children came across something unusual lying on the ground in the clearing, an object that, to people who had never seen anything like it and had no reason to suspect what it was, would have appeared simply as strange debris. Curious, as people are when they encounter something unfamiliar in the woods, they approached it. One of them, accounts suggest it may have been one of the children, touched or moved the object. It detonated. Archie Mitchell, still some distance away with the car, heard the explosion. He ran toward the clearing. What he found there was his pregnant wife and all 5 children killed in the blast. Elsie Mitchell, Joan Patsky, Jay Gifford, Edward Engen, Sherman Shoemaker, Dick Patsky, 6 people. one of them not yet born. They remain to this day the only known combat deaths to occur on the continental United States mainland during the entirety of the Second World War as a direct result of enemy action. The device that killed them was almost certainly a fragmentation bomb component from one of the Japanese Fugo balloons, one of the hundreds that had drifted across the Pacific and come down somewhere in the forests of the Pacific Northwest, where it had apparently sat undiscovered, its payload still live until a group of children on a church picnic found it. The wartime censorship that had kept the balloon campaign out of American newspapers had also inadvertently kept information about the danger of these objects away from the very communities where they were landing. People in Oregon, Washington, California, and other western states had no way of knowing that strange objects occasionally found in forests and fields might be live ordnance from an enemy weapon, because the existence of that weapon had been deliberately kept from public knowledge.